Welcome to Behind the Badge. This podcast aims to improve the health and well-being of frontline workers. Each episode features candid conversations with former and current frontline community members and subject matter experts. Join us as we explore the unique nature of serving in high-risk roles, sharing inspiring stories of resilience, strategies, and resources. We are not qualified health professionals, nor are we aligned with any organization. The opinions expressed in the podcast are solely our own. Additionally, the content may evoke strong emotional responses for some. Listener discretion is advised.
G'day team, welcome back to Behind the Badge, the podcast exploring the health, well-being and human stories behind frontline service. Just quickly, if you've been enjoying the show or you've taken something out of any of the episodes so far, we'd really appreciate it if you could show us some love and hit that like, subscribe, follow button on whatever listening platform that you get this on. On to today. So we're joined by Harry Moffitt, former SASR operator, psychologist and author of multiple books. Harry's journey from the battlefield to the consulting room has given him a rare perspective on human performance, one grounded in philosophy, service and the pursuit of meaning. In this episode, we talk about the lessons learnt across decades of high-performance environments, the importance of identity and curiosity, and how philosophy can offer a different perspective on human performance. We hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Harry Moffitt.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having us on.
No dramas. Thanks for giving us your time, mate. We really appreciate you making some time in what I gather is probably a pretty busy schedule. What we normally like to do is get a bit of context for the listeners about your background. So usually we'll start at the start and chat a little bit about your upbringing, where you grew up and how you grew up.
Sure. Well, I'm a proud Victorian, grew up in and around Melbourne. I'm the son of a nurse and a sailor. Father was in the Navy. So I was kind of born into a life of service, which I'm really proud of and grateful for now, definitely. Grew up, travelled around the Australia following my father's postings for the most part. And then finished Year 12 and straight out of Year 12 joined the Army with the intent of giving SAS selection a crack. And it was well in my purview at that stage, as well in my consciousness. I'd read a bunch of books and was kind of transfixed on it. And that was it. And then joined in 86, way back last century. And in 1990, I had a crack at SAS selection and was lucky enough to sneak through. And that's where I spent the rest of my adult life, really. I spent up until 2017 posted there and then left Defence Force in 2019. And I still go back to the regiment every year to help with mentoring and run some workshops for the new operators that are coming through. And I mentor a dozen other guys that are there in various stages of their career. So you never really leave the joint. It takes its pound of flesh and then some. But that's okay by me. It's nice to be connected. Outside of that, I love sports, footy, cricket, mad, and married with a couple of adult kids now. I work as a psychologist with across a variation of organisations, sports teams, AFL, NRL, work with hedge funds, as I was just saying to you offline, which I find fascinating. You wouldn't think it, but private capital teams operate a lot like sports teams, like elite sports teams. They put in big, long hours, high consequence kind of environments. So that's where the bulk of my work is, and I do a lot of work in the veteran space as well, and where they'll have me back with the ADF and some of your folk as well, fireys and police and other mission critical teams. I guess that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. Yeah, cool. So just going back to your lead up into the ADF, you said that Special Forces was always on your radar to begin with. Was that through influence from your old man being in Defence Force, or was that sort of another interest that you found on your own?
I think so. I mean, you don't really know what you're going to do when you're young. I don't think. I think you have a sense of things you're attracted to and passions, and then your parents drive a lot of that, of course, the influence. But I guess I met what really kind of crystallised it for me, because I wanted to do everything: opening batting for Australia, run out a full forward for Hawthorn Footy Club, the team I support, be an architect, be a psychologist. That's part of me being a psychologist today is a little bit of unfinished business. But I met a guy by the name of Martin Studdart. I read a couple of books, and I just you won't remember this, but boring short story. In 1980, the British SAS, 22 SAS, publicly resolved a hostage situation at a place called Princess Gate in London. And if you go back through the archives, it was world news. These black-clad, wearing masks, tooled up, climbing and roping up and down onto the balconies of the Iranian embassy in London, 1980, and that was flickered all across the front pages of the newspapers. It was on our grainy, box black and white television in the corner, and that just grabbed my mind. And really, that was what set about the fascination with the military, and wondering firstly, what the hell are they doing, and secondly, is that something I can do? And so that was really the spark that set me off and sent me. And as I said at the start, I have a sense of service. I think I was always headed for something in this realm or in that realm, just from the influence of my parents.
Very nice. And so you had that influence, or that spark prior to getting in. You joined, did you say, was it 80?
1986, off to K-Town, and then I joined this Signals Corps to start with. Back in those days, you just went where they put you in the military, and must have shown a little bit of aptitude for Morse code and languages and all this other stuff. So that was where I made that's where I spent my transformative years in the military.
Yep, awesome.
How was that that you made the decision to go into the SAS? Was that
1990 was selection, yeah.
How was that? Were you mentally prepared for? Obviously, you'd been in the service for some time. Were you mentally prepared for that challenge? Like, was it what you expected, or more?
I was ready, absolutely. I've been asked that question a lot, and when I reflect back, I was mad for it. I felt mentally and physically ready. The reference point is mentally and physically ready, that I could, as best as I could be, to give it the best possible shot that I could imagine I could give it. The course itself, it's funny. I'm still on a chat with the guys from my reinforcement cycle. There was 20 of us that made it through, or a few more, 23, I think it was, out of 150 odd, and all of us will say, "Oh, it wasn't that bloody hard." But I think if you've succeeded in something, it never seems as hard as it was at the time, because you take the relief, which is a large part of the emotion, but the elation in successfully getting through those things. But yes, the course was hugely challenging, but again, I felt prepared for it. I was confident, not overly so, but prepared for failure. I felt like I'd done my homework. And like I said, I remember them finally telling me that I'd snuck in, and just huge relief more than anything. There wasn't any celebration. I felt there was more just absolute relief, and then the real work really started. Your reinforcement period is 18 months, some years 2 years long. So sometimes 2 years long. So it's that was the part that was I really struggled with, if I struggled with any part of my service.
So when you say struggle, in what way?
Just the learning curve is so steep. You have to catch up, because they're not in the business of training people who are not physically or mentally or cognitively or intellectually ready. That's not the business. The business is to pick up people ready to drink from the fire hose. And I had lots of self reflection and lots of negative thoughts and self-doubt all through that period, just with the volume of learning, both physical learning, competence, mentally, and as I said, intellectually as well. It's not just about shooting and blowing things up and doing push-ups. You're learning languages, computer science at that stage. Same today. They're still learning coding and things. Communications. That probably one of the most difficult ones was the para medicine course that we do, and abridged paramedicine. We're stitching things up and using all the drugs and surgical procedures, and it's all crammed in pretty quick. So it was a bloody relief to finish that period. We lost a few more along the way, but it was good to finally get into the teams and crack on with business.
Mate, that would have been 1992-ish that you wrapped up the reinforcement cycle?
That's right, yeah, about 92.
So what did life for you look like once you qualified and moved out of that, noting that at that point in time there wasn't as much conflict as there was, say, into the 2000s with Timor, Iraq, Afghanistan, all that sort of stuff. What did that sort of regiment life look like for you after Rio?
It's bloody busy. You could say the same now, but the regiment's, I would argue, the busiest organisation in Australia. It's it's Parkinson's law. If you've got a minute, you'll fill it with work, and if you got if you've got a week, you'll fill it with work. We were just training, back-to-back exercise. We worked with emergency services, police. We had, in those days, if you had time, you had placements at hospitals, placements with businesses. And the world really was, we were forging what is today's modern counter-terrorism. The heyday was the 70s and 80s. That was the golden age of counter-terrorism, all the planes being hijacked and various things. Princess Gate fell out of that in 1980. And then when I arrived, it was just maturing to the point where there was a whole suite of new weapons, new tactics, and et cetera. So we were part guinea pig, part innovators for that period for Australia. So lots of travel overseas. We also have always had an interest in regionally, whether it be Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, the South Pacific. That Southeast Asia and the South Pacific has always been broken up in areas of responsibility. So I was in K Troop, and our area of responsibility was to maintain a relationship with Thailand. So it's parachuting, water ups, the whole 9 yards. So very, very busy. Not much going on operationally from a combat perspective, but lots going on in the intelligence world and other areas. We had, probably it wasn't until the end of the 90s before we had the Somalia, Timor, and Iraq 1 commitments, and the unit was front and centre for those.
What was the shift or the transition like when those things started to kick off and those that operational tempo increased? How did that look for you? Because at that point you would have been 10 years in the regiment as well.
Yeah, it was. I had a brief sabbatical in the UK working with some police, but I like to think, I've thought about this. It kind of parallels my being prepared for selection. The unit was prepared for it. The unit has a mindset, a word I'm not enamoured by, but it has an attitude to its roles and tasks that anywhere, anytime, anything. And our job is just to maintain the most up-to-date capability to match that land, sea, air, or virtual terrains. And so it was with an obvious decision to send the unit to these various theatres, and not all of them were as cut and dry and as simple as going straight into combat roles. There were intelligence gathering, special reconnaissance, and so on. We were ready for all of that. So I'm proud to say that the unit really did represent Australia at the highest level, proudly and professionally. remember that we've got one thing we need to keep in mind, Josh, is these are wars of choice too. So these are wars that we can choose to or not get involved in, and so that makes a difference, because we're going in under the guises of supporting coalition forces like the US, who bring a might of power. And for us, it was a real eye-opener, because we had all these resources all of a sudden, and we could do far more without, we had increased capability. But the Americans liked us because, and the Kiwis as well, who I think, the Australians and Kiwis, I think there's a case to be made, a pound for pound amongst the best soldiers in the world, because we don't have all the resources, so we are resourceful, and we're able to go places that, seriously, frankly, the Americans, and to a lesser extent the English, don't want to go and do those shitty jobs 20 days in the mountains, living off the bones of your ass, almost literally. So we really found our niche in those early wars. And, another great example is the dash across the desert in Iraq, where we literally raced the US and the UK SOF in long-range desert patrolling and smashed them. So these are niche capabilities that the Australians bring. We don't have the DA, or we didn't in those days, technical capability, and the US and UK were far advanced to it. But we really filled a niche that was super critical, especially up hunting Osama bin Laden.
It's interesting to hear you talk about, the varying roles that you hold, as the varying roles that the regiment holds. For you personally, Harry, what was your function across some of those roles, and did they change because he's had quite an extended period all the way up to 2017? How did your role change through your career?
Yeah, so it's changed profoundly. I came back from the UK, so up until then, I was a operator in a 2IC, and up until 2000, the unit was reorganised, and I went into a team as the medic, communicator, JTAC, that's a forward combat controller who calls in fast air or air support or artillery support if in some cases. So I filled every role. I did out of uniform operations, the SR patrols we did up in the mountains on the border with Pakistan, in Waziristan, etc., watching the various mobs, ISIS, Taliban, Al Qaeda. They're all kind of in together, all kind of fused together. They were special reconnaissance type jobs, and then over time, the unit was on high rotation, and you had to adapt over time. Some roles I would be a team commander, other times I'd be a 2IC, depending on what capability. If it was, for example, it needed a free fall capability, particularly night and oxygen and jumping equipment and dogs and people, I would be the go-to senior guy for that. However, if we were going in under a water ops or vehicle mounted, then other guys would take the lead on that, and I would come in and manage people and material in support of that. So it was a pretty fluid kind of organisation, and it's not above anyone to take a step up and down the rungs of command in those tactical situations. And it wasn't really till probably 2005, 6, 7, where I took in like the senior role. So what we call Bravos, the senior sergeant and kind of warrant officer roles, where you're running groups of teams. And so that's, probably more a strategic role, less in the weeds, although you're still going out with the teams. And still a team commander for some missions, overall commander. But that was. It's funny, the question, the kind of interesting point to make here is that around that time, I wrote to Canberra and said, "Can I have a moratorium put on my career to remain a sergeant?" And it's not common, but it's not uncommon. And what does that mean? It means that I don't want to advance. Take me off the promotions. I want to stay in the teams. It's a brilliant place to be in a team of 30 or 40 operators, and you're all doing different things, but occasionally you all come together and do big things together. And I really didn't want to leave that. I was watching my mates go off to Excel spreadsheet world and the management, risk management and all this kind of carry on, and they weren't very happy. And I thought, that's not for me. When I'm finished and washed up, I'll move on to other things. But I just wanted to stay on the teams, and I was very lucky. My last mission was in 2013, and I would have been 45 years old. Which, thinking about it now, was a remarkable luck. It wasn't, better operators than me didn't make it that far through, just misfortune or injuries, etc. So to be on the tools that long was an absolute gift, and I was just lucky that there wasn't that many people pushing up behind me to push me out of the way. But in the end, one of the lads just said, "Harry, you look tired. You're too old. Give it up, mate," and he was right.
So how many trips all up? How many tours?
So 11 is the short answer, but there's nuance to that. So some of those were hit and runs that only lasted a month. So we went in to do hard action, direct action kind of stuff. Others were 8 months long. The majority were around 4 to 6 months. That's the window. But there's the untold story of the operational stuff. Everyone we've fixated on numbers, and to our detriment at times. But it's the amount of time you spend away when you're back. So when you get back, you get a couple of months off, as you should. But then you have to upskill. There's a new you guys know this better than I do. There's a new piece of kit that comes in that you've got to be upskilled on, and if you're not the person who manages it, you need to be across it. There's regional engagement, which will be 2 weeks away or 3 weeks away. There's courses overseas. There's concentrations overseas, and there's not many of us, particularly at the senior level. So you can spend 5 months, 6 months of the year away on ops, but you can also spend 4 months of the year away, literally out of bed. You're not sleeping in your own bed overseas on supporting activities.
So at that point, Harry, were you married with children, or was that sort of not at that stage?
No, I was, Jason, yeah. And so it's had a huge impact on particularly my relationship with my son. And obviously, it got to the point where being away was like being at home, and being at home was like being away. And that's very, I'd say that very seriously. And it is a bit foreign. Towards the end of my time, it was foreign, but I kept in touch with the real world through my cricket and footy club. That was really the way I remained grounded, and I think it played a massive role. I've only really realised this in recent times, how big a role. And one of the messages I give to the young guys now is, don't let this place be all you are. For Christ's sake, have a life outside, whether it's cricket, crochet, or chess. I don't really care, but have an identity that's deeper and richer than just this knuckle dragging kind of job. It's not knuckle, that's unfair. This kind of SAS identity, because it's the best thing in the world, but it can also be the worst thing. It can hold you down, and you can get stuck in time. And I see that time and time again. But yeah, so big toll on the family. And my wife is a saint, absolute rock. She could have kicked me out any number of times. That I think she's too lazy to do it. So thank God for that. Yeah.
Dealing with those, I guess the commitment to serve and the time away and that sort of stuff. Was there anything that you were doing at the time to try and, balance the scales a little bit and try and maintain a sense of normalcy at home?
In terms of family?
Yeah. So in terms of your book, which we'll get to, I've read in there that you look at the whole human and its family support and all of those sort of things. I'm just interested to know whether those points of view that you bring across in the book you've learned through experience, or were you actively putting some of these things in place while you were going through that in your service?
Yeah, interesting. Really, really interesting question because until 2008, when I was wounded, no, I was just on this self-indulgent Harry Moffitt luxury trip with the SAS. It was the never-ending summer. Yeah, I had a family. My daughter was, 10, 12 by then. I had quite a good relationship with her because she was born when we weren't doing much and going places, and a lot of the time was at home. My son was born just as September 11, or around the time September 11 kicked off. So um, up until 2008, and when I was wounded, I spent a fair bit of time wallowing in my own negativity in a dark room on intravenous antibiotics, and it kind of just snapped me back in what is life about, and where do I go now if I lose my leg, which at one stage it looked like was going to happen. What do I do? How do I provide for my family? And then, oh shit, I've got a family now. I've got a responsibility. The military and sometimes all of our services take care of us a little too well at times. Was certainly the case for us. So after 2008, Josh, I definitely had a different perspective on what mattered and how I could. So I became. I wrote a lot more letters. I spent a lot more time empathizing with my kids and wife on the phone. That it's not happy. Not every day for them is a happy day. They're arguing and fighting and trying to empathize back home. And that was around the time I started to realize how important the cricket club was to my grounding back home, how important education was because I needed a plan B. I didn't have one. I thought I was going to live forever. And also how much I need to invest into my marriage. Marriage is not a set and forget thing. And anyone who coasts through and expects it to be this or expects to be treated a certain way is kidding themselves. And put a lot more time into that. And it was around that time, and another kind of little story in the book is the reset story that Danielle and I developed over time. Those things really came to the fore after you've had a near-death experience, and I'm kind of sad and a bit disappointed in myself that it took that to get to that point.
Hearing that, I mean, it's not like, and I'm speaking from someone who hasn't got any defense background, but when you're there, you have to be on. The whole time you're switched on. It's not like you're going on a FIFO sitting on the back of an excavator. So, what I'm getting at is how much time can you allow to think of the family back home when you have to be on the whole time? Not
Yeah.
saying obviously that you're not thinking about your family, but it's like if I go to work after having an argument, I'll dwell on that at work. But I'm guessing in that sort of environment, you've got to push that aside somehow and be on your game that whole time.
Yeah, I think you would know too, Jason, that that it kind of comes a little naturally in the moment. So when you're going into a dangerous situation, well, the mind does it for you. The brain shuts down extraneous noise, audio occlusion, shuts down peripheral information, forces blood and whatnot to hormones and chemicals to the right places in the body distributed and sets you up for hyperfocus, hypervigilance, and it kind of blocks out those things. What you're alluding to there is kind of compartmentalizing between the moments of high arousal and terror and all the rest of it. And it's hard not to. I think as you mature and you go back for your second and third and fourth rotations and you start to miss the family and start to understand what you're, again, quite self-indulgent. I mean that in a heartfelt way. I'm not having a crack at myself or anyone, but it is. You need to be necessarily so. But and the times that it really got to me were, there were times where we carried out missions in which civilians were killed and young boys were killed, and that probably rocked me more than anything. More it's probably more than seeing your mates get hurt, because you can contextualize that. That hurts. That really does hurt, but you can contextualize. That's the whole reason we're there. It's kind of the point. But I remember nursing a young boy who'd been mortally wounded, a massive head injury, and nursing him while he died after a suicide bombing incident. And that boy sticks with me more than anything. And it wasn't traumatic at the time, and it wasn't, even his injury wasn't particularly traumatic. There was blast and shock exposure, being very close to the blast. However, it's him that kind of sticks in my head, because every time I saw him, he was around the same age as my son, and that stuck with me. I carried him, and in a way, it became the lightning rod for all the future the trauma I suffered, or not suffered, was exposed to after that. So yeah, these things can be real. They're never far away. I talk about it in the book. Number of times I've seen young soldiers. I've experienced it myself, having arguments over the phone with their wife, and you think, wow, how can you have arguments? Well, because she's at home with 3 screaming kids, of 18 months, 2 years old, 3, whatever, 3 and 5 years old, or school problems or money problems or whatever the case may be, and these things, and you're on no sleep, you've been eating terribly, and you're 5 months into a reverse cycle, and you're just a gaunt shadow of yourself. So, and that you can see that out on the ground at times. You guys are thinking and dwelling, and you really need to get around each other and say, hey, it'll be okay. I understand, I empathise, and I think that's a part of leadership that is probably not talked about that often, but it's real, and you're dead right, Jason, when you say you need to have everyone out there with you, sitting beside you and focused on the same thing, because particularly in some cases where you're fighting larger forces, they don't forgive your weaknesses. They'll consume them pretty quickly. So everyone needs to be switched on.
You mentioned, you nearly lost your leg in 2008, and that was sort of a catalyst for a bit of a change in the way that you maybe prioritized things or looked at things. Just quickly, what was that incident?
Yeah, it was 2008, Afghan. I can't remember what rotation it was. The vehicle I was driving drove over an improvised explosive device. It turned out it may have been an old Russian anti-tank mine. And Sean McCarthy was standing in the cupola, like just behind me, reaching distance, and he bore, unfortunately, most of that blast and was killed pretty much instantly. And the interpreter was sitting in the back of the car, effectively lost both of his legs. He lost one completely, and the other one was obliterated. And Wayne Weeks and I suffered relatively minor injuries. I had some shrapnel through the backs of my legs and some burns. Bit of bruise, back was pretty cactus, but and he broke an arm and suffered some lacerations as well. So we were super lucky to get out of that, and then everything was fine. I was going to work in the admin room until I got better, and then an infection started, and that was what sent me back home, unfortunately, because at the time I felt shame for leaving the country. I had a few scratches on the back of my legs, and I had about 10 stitches all up, and I felt like a bloody fraud, but soon got over that, and that was, so that infection is what I was referring to before.
And so just to follow on from that, when you said that was sort of a catalyst moment for you to look at things a bit differently, and you said that, family was important, you mentioned also in there education as well.
Yeah.
Is that when you started looking at psychology and diving into that?
Yeah, I'd already been studying psychology, but really with no focus to it. I just, I was fortunate. My father, he was not just a sailor, he was a sailor, but he wasn't educated formally, but a very smart man, a broad reader. It's still to this day probably one of the broadest and deepest informally educated humans I know, without a question. And so I had that as an inspiration, and reading was something I've always carried a book with me. I don't read dozens and dozens of books a year, but I always have one going, or two or three actually. So that was something I just felt, as I said before, a little bit of unfinished business from finishing year 12. And it was kind of just born into me. My father's been a huge influence, as I hope that everyone's father is to them. But around that time, again, I thought, what the fuck am I going to do if I lose a leg? I'm handy with a footy and a cricket bat and a gun, and I don't see much of a future in that for a one-legged dude. So, which is being unfair, but that was my mindset at the time. So that was it. And out of that too, I started a unit-wide education push. I become this zealot. I pissed a lot of people off, but we started the Wanderers Education Program, which I'm super proud of, and that's education anywhere, anything, anytime, of the operators choosing at a rate they want to study. There's no metrics, no outcomes. It's journey based, and that's available to all operators. I'd love to see that spread to the whole ADF, and I'd love to see that spread to all of our services, because when you think about it, we take Josh and Jason and we take them off and we select them based on a bunch of uncommon characteristics, right? So they're not the highest IQ or the toughest but I tell you what, they're as close across all of those domains as you're going to get in one individual, and that is rare. We've got lots of people who can kick footies and hit cricket balls, but without being too unkind, they're probably not, the top cognitive or psychological or intellectual. So, and the same for soldiers across the. But when we put assessment, when you think about it, if you bring them all into one level, we place a lot of training and development into people like us in mission critical teams. And I think the missing piece for me that I bang on about is that education piece. And that's not tertiary, PhD, masters, although it can be. That's what you want. But it's just additional formal, structured education of your choosing. And I think that's the important thing. Whatever you're interested in, there's another way to know more about it and think about it. And it's kind of part of my book. So I call it embodied wisdom. When you reach the age of around 40 or so, just pick a number, and you've been in your job for as long as you guys have, you have this incredible amount of embodied wisdom that we just seem not to value as much as I want us to, and I think that's part of the drive behind that education piece. It's not a university degree for everyone. It might be computer science for the nerds, or carpentry, or ancient history. I don't care. That's why we leave our operators to choose their own journey, and I think that's the important part. And as you can see, I'm super passionate about it, and there's a lot more work to be done. And just to wind up the tail of that is I think it would have a huge impact. I suspect it would have a huge impact intuitively on the end of career lives of our mission critical team operators. And what do I mean by mission critical teams? They're fire and rescue, police, medicine and all medicine, military, those people who go off to the extraordinary world of, leave this ordinary world of post office boxes and meat pies and pints at the pub and whatnot, and go off to serve us as a community. We should. I'm in service to them, and that's kind of the education's a big part of that.
Do you think that education would be beneficial for everyone in those cohorts, because you would simultaneously build, I guess, other interests and other skill sets that would put you in good stead for the event that when you do leave, whatever that job is, whether that's fire, rescue, ADF, because that transition piece seems to be quite a big deal, to leave that those roles and move into something else.
It's a huge deal, but it's huge in a lot of other cases. I can normalize that by saying that an analyst in the private capital world who spends, 15 years working 70, 80-hour weeks, giving up, sacrificing life, riding the highs and lows of making tons of money and then losing tons of money. These at the end of, if they are burnt out, over it, made their money, want to move on and transition, they struggle with it. But there's a certain camaraderie in our services when I could go on, but I won't, but I'll park it. But when you go off to the extraordinary world where you're prepared to do those things, to run towards the fire, that is forged. And I think we've got the language wrong that, you lose purpose or lose identity or lose tribe. I don't think that's helpful in building a negative narrative, or I'm trying to build a counter narrative to that. You leave the ordinary world to go off to the extraordinary world, but eventually you've got to come back to it. And so there needs to be an acceptance that this is the path that we chose and there's a path back. And I'd like to see that, us talk a bit more healthily about that. And the education piece is not so much about the formal structures, learning, information, knowledge, data, this type of stuff. It's about how you view the world. And when you read more broadly, when you are educated in formal and informal ways, your mind starts to see the world differently because it's opened up. I always laugh at a CIA guy told us once that he was sitting down having a powwow with some local village elders, and he said, and I'm not sure if he's borrowing someone else's story, but he showed footage of man landing on the moon, and there were young men in that audience who couldn't even, but blew their mind. Like, what do you mean? They said, well, this happened 50 years ago, but did you know because they don't have phones, they don't have access, and their education or their way of life is hugely constraining for them. So the first time they see man, and that's for me a really dramatic but great example of what education or pursuing an erudite life, if you want to put it that way, how important it is for us, and it builds the consciousness, it builds the muscles of our consciousness and mind and our worldview. And I think the book, The Fourth Pillar, that's what the fourth pillar is. We have a physical preparation and maintenance. We have a psychological these days. That's all the rage, the mental skills, and that's just in its absolute infancy at the moment. And these days there's a social element to our preparation and maintenance too. Men now care for each other and understand connection and understand what it means to share personal, which wouldn't have happened in my day. I promise you that. That was seen as soft and, homophobically gay and all this type of stuff. It's just rubbish. We should care for each other. But then there's this worldview part, and I think that's a really important aspect.
So you mentioned before, towards the latter part of your career, and sticking on that theme of transition, that some of the younger colleagues of yours mentioned that it's looking a bit slow out there, and it was, you knew at that point it was time to maybe look at that plan B. And
yeah, I knew a bit earlier than that, but ego was a powerful thing.
What did that process look like for you, and what did you transition into, and how did all of that sort of look like for you?
So I decided the last combat mission, and then I had one final role as a station head in another part of the business that we ran, and I was interested in kind of completing my studies, but I looked around the unit. I thought about some instructional positions and other kind of senior roles, administration, and nothing really appealed to me. I'd done a lot of instructing and whatnot along the way. That's just par for the course as you're going through. And I had a visit with a colleague of mine to Fort Bragg in the US. We went across for a special ops concentration where we share information, missions, what's been going on. And I met a couple of people who were in the human performance space. And it opened my eyes, talk about worldview changing. It opened my eyes to how we were doing business back in Perth, and we were pretty good, but we weren't doing near what we could do to prepare and maintain our soldiers, and particularly at the end of their careers. So high performance programming entered the lexicon for me, and I'd known about it for a little while before and through psychology studies and a bit more, but that was when I really took it seriously. And so I set up the first human performance program in the ADF, and got about I went and literally found $1.8 million in Canberra and redid our whole gym. We dragged the psychologists out of the backwaters and into the gyms and down onto the gun ranges and turned them from therapy dogs into performance specialists. We revamped the whole mess and nutritional part of it. We conducted sleep programs, and the list goes on. And you would think in an environment like that everyone would want to shoot the lights out and they'd suck this stuff up and want to be better. But humans are hard to change, and so there was a bit of resistance around. But I'm glad to say in the end, I think people came around to stop wearing sleep deprivation as a badge of honour, taking sleep seriously and eating properly. I think up until then it was eat big to get big was the mantra, and it's just you kind of you're missing out on a whole range of things, particularly if you want to sustain yourself over a long career. Operators don't like to hear that their beach muscles aren't that important. The most important muscles that you have, and for you guys as well, is your posterior chain and lower back and back straps. They're really important in being able to do your job if you love it for a long time, and also big doesn't equal long term. Rudog kind of builds are probably the best builds I would, in my experience. So these were some of the changes we had to try and convince people were good for them. And so that was the job I had for the next few years in the regiment, as their human performance manager, and we got a great team together, and the legacy's really strong. We look after our operators way better than we ever used to, including families, including their transition, and including, operators putting their hands up for help if they need a break, and that's a problem as well. You've got to protect them from themselves.
So, Harry, you were saying you're still involved with the units. You go down, and do you see a change in, I don't know if culture's the right word, but to when you went through, say, to the generation that's coming through now? Is there the younger ones don't seem to take failure well at all? Can you notice a big shift in that area with or recruits, or in that process?
Yeah, it's on everybody's lips, isn't it? Intergenerational change, and what does the next group coming through look like? Not really. I think where our selection processes are still attractive to the right people. I think the processes that we use, to assess and select and train are still robust. And I'm intimidated when I walk into a room, particularly full of what we call fat Rios. They're the ones who have, the skinny Rios are the ones who've just finished selection course, so they lose a bunch of weight and they all look skinny and gaunt. And then through that reinforcement cycle of 18 odd months, they fatten them up again and they look back to kind of, normal. It doesn't take that long. But, when I see the guys rolling off the end of the reinforcement cycle, the long reinforcement cycle, it's intimidating, because they are the sharpest, most advanced operators that we've ever produced. Their technical prowess, their coding, their language prowess, their medical capability, the whole nine yards, and more. They're impressive. So I don't really notice. Some of the old begrudging guys might say they've got an air of entitlement, but I don't. I think that's unfair. I think what they are is they're more likely to question things, whereas And if you look at what I did when I came through, I was a bloody coward in comparison. I'd just sit there and, I disagree with that, but I'll just go along with it, and that's not the kind of culture you want. If you want, what we need is bricoleurs, what I call bricoleurs, like alchemists, like, resourceful human beings that can do anything with a limited amount of resource, be dropped into the middle of the desert. And when you come back in a week, there's a bar and festoon lighting and a little market over there. They kind of make things. They can do anything with limited resources. So you want them to be questioning all the time, and I think that can be misreceived at times. I use that example because I think that's happening more broadly. To the intergenerational thing, I've got a different position on that. In World War I, at the end of World War I, we saw the rise of scouts and church groups and experiential events and children being taken away with part of schools, Outward Bound, all of these programs that were designed to build the next generation tough, because they thought all the men had gone away to war and been killed, and this next generation coming through were riding the coattails of entitlement on the hard work of those generations. We saw and you know what? They went away in World War II and did a bloody good job, those 18-year-olds, those 17-year-olds, and some of them were 16. There's a book by Roland Griffiths March, which I commend to everyone to read if you're interested in military history. It's an absolutely brilliant book called I Was Only 16. Absolutely brilliant. He was 21, 22. He came back and he'd been in 4 theatres of war and been away to World War II for 4 years. And he makes the claim in there, that they were seen as weak and, too worried about technical stuff and rock and roll music, that was the devil and whatnot. But I tell you what, they did a pretty bloody good job on Kokoda and a pretty good job in the deserts of North Africa, these 16. So I kind of cut the generations a little bit of slack in that regard. I worry, what I do worry about more broadly, not so much in our soldiers, because there's plenty of, we are lucky, and as are you, all services kind of pick from a good swathe of the cream of people who are have a combination of the smarts and the physical and psychological and social ability to do the jobs we need to do. But more generally speaking, this generation that's coming through now, the digital natives, the ones your children, I would hesitate to guess if Josh and Jason have got any, the younger generation who are on screens and exposed to the tech, tyranny, dare I say it. I don't know what that looks like. It'll be a little while before they hit the streets. They probably by 2030 we'll see the first full real digital natives, and I'll be really interested to see what happens with them from a psychological perspective, but that has implications physically as well. I think physically the world's still in a pretty good shape, but we need to now defend that. We can't take these things for granted anymore. And my books are maybe a clumsy old gunslinger, ex-operator, knuckle dragger's view of the world, but I hope one of the things I want the book to be about, I wanted the book to purvey, was that there's things that we're losing that we need to stay in touch with to maintain their, not only their physical standards, but their psychological and, as I say, radically perhaps their philosophical, their worldview, their ability to be creative and imagine a future. And I worry that that's atrophying.
Great segue, mate. The book. Let's have a bit more of a chat about that. The 4th pillar. You sort of touched on it there. What is the 4th pillar? And the philosophical aspect, when did you sort of show an interest or start looking into that?
So the 4th pillar is the philosophical dimension, if you will, of human performance. Wittingly or unwittingly, all high-performance programs, and Josh, as you know in the book, I kind of bristle at high performance. It's a mechanistic term that I use to make a deeper point. But all human performance programs are based on 3 pillars: physical, psychological, and social. Now, some programs have a spiritual pillar, others have an environmental pillar, some others have a cognitive pillar or emotional pillar, and that's cool. But they're all variations of that 3 pillars. And I met a guy by the name of Percy Cerity back in, late 2000s, from the grave. He died last century. He was, I believe, the world's greatest athletics coach. There's a very strong claim that can be made for that. And his belief, without going deep into his philosophy, a friend of mine just released a book, Andrew Gunn, on Percy Cerity, which is a cracker. Again, I commend that to everyone. Percy Cerity believed that our philosophical condition, how we see the world, our view of life and experience, the quality of our experience, the very quality, it's called qualia, our qualia and our essence, that everybody has a sense that there's something wiser in us than us. There's I think that was Emerson who said that. And this is this qualia, this quality that we have. And I feel that in the pursuit of stronger, fitter, faster, human optimization, I can't stand that term, but I'm happy to use it. In focusing on making you better firefighters, a human platform on which to launch other capability, etc. We've kind of we've dehumanized the operator. And yes, we do need warfighters. Yes, we do need firefighters. Yes, we do need tactical police and to be able to use these machines. And we need them to go and be resources, exploitable resources. But we can't forget that there's very human, deep human qualities. And this is the case I try to make in the book, that philosophy is the missing piece. I agree with Percy Cerity. Herb Elliott, who was arguably Australia's greatest runner, is certainly one of two or three, was the prize stallion out of the Cerity camp of dozens. And he said that you didn't go to Percy Cerity to learn how to run or throw or kick. You went to Percy Cerity to learn how to be a human. And that's profound if you stop and think about that claim by one of the most lovable rogues in sports ever, or not a rogue. He was a smart man, and that's kind of the hook or the thread I'm pulling on in the book is that we need to bring it back, and those philosophical praxes that the ancient philosophers have told us about are I think more relevant than ever and needed more than ever, and they're very obvious. They're not 10 ways to hack your life before breakfast. They're deep praxes that I think we're losing, and I think it's remiss. I really do.
Mm.
Are those elements present now in the human performance cell within the regiment? Are they integrated into those systems currently?
To a lesser degree, but there's still work to be done. I think the education piece gives operators a place to be patient and wait. Again, I don't think the type of people that we select don't know that waiting and observing the world and being patient in the world and finding space to spend time alone and be comfortable in your own skin without being distracted, to experience self-doubt but not suffer it. Writing and reading are key. They're things that we won't be without in the unit. These are key skills that must be carried and practiced. And also observational skills, how to listen and hear rather than wait to talk, and how to build personal relationships. These kind of, I map them out in the book. I'm glossing over them, but these key abilities, if you look at any university management course these days, the majority of those things are highly valued, and these practices underpin. I'll just list them for you. I'll give my best shot, but in the book I list the 8 privileges, and they are privileges because you need to have the resources to support them. It is waiting, watching, listening, talking, reading, writing, thinking, and walking. and they sound simplistic, but I go into more depth in the book. Um, these underpin. These are the situations, practices that underpin creativity. They underpin curiosity. They underpin imagination, or as Andy Walsh calls it, imagineering. That's where we can imagine a future state in problem solving, for example. Interpersonal relationships, holding empathy, not gaining. Empathy is something that we can entertain, and that's how you build relationships. These types of things, I think, are atrophying as children, and we are stolen. Our attention is stolen away from us. We spend less time with ourselves. I can't help but think it may be related somehow to the so-called explosion in mental health and anxiety and stress, etc. So this is it's a very serious point making here, but I think it is serious, and that's I hope what the reader takes away, and hopefully for the most part agrees. I'm not a philosopher. My best philosophy is done bar side with a pint of Guinness in my hand. But I think we're all small p philosophers, and philosophizing, curiosity, intuition, these things are really important.
Oh, that's awesome, Harry.
Mm.
And so outside of the book, what else are you doing with yourself post-service?
Yeah, well, I'm being a psychologist. I was speaking to a colleague in the US this morning, and I said to him, I feel like I've finished my apprenticeship now. So if I break it down very quickly, I left in 2019. I spent the first year after that, really, or around that, finishing my master's, research, and submitting my thesis, etc., and then registered as a psychologist. And in 2020, when I finished with the defence and registered, I've been practicing as a psychologist. And I sat and thought about it. I contemplate a lot. I like my own company. No one else will have me. So I thought really deeply about it. I thought, well, how should I see the world? How should I view the world? And I decided that I'd just take on an apprentice mindset. Again, a word I'm not doing. That was my attitude. That's a word I prefer. The attitude of an apprentice, that I'm here to learn. I've been given a couple of amazing opportunities. I worked with Collingwood Footy Club. I worked with a good friend of mine, a hedge fund founder and owner. I was working a bit in the veteran space as well, and I just decided that I was back to square one, and back to the 6 I see in a team, and that's been a really helpful thing to do. I've cut myself some slack. When people come to me and say, "Oh, teach us some wisdom, Harry, you did 30 years with the SA," and I say, well, I don't know yet. I'm still trying to work out how that transfers. So, and the other kind of mind shift is that I'm now no longer what I used to be. I'm now becoming what I'm going to be in the future, and that is a civilian. So I'm no longer the SAS soldier. It was a great part of my life, but it was only a part. And now I need to re-civilianize, and not demilitarize, but re-civilianize. And that's taken a little bit of effort. I still get a bit gnarly when civvies turn up late and things like that. But I've really enjoyed it. I've met some amazing civilians and really enjoyed doing that. So now I feel competent. I understand the civilian world. I feel reconnected. And so now I feel as if I can be a competent and confident psychologist. I'm really enjoying that feeling, cutting myself some slack and working in corporate sports and the veteran space and the military space as well. And the other thing is just enjoying my family. It's kind of crazy, but my son and I, still wrinkles in our relationship. We will get there, I'm sure, but it's nice to be able to spend dedicated time and have a bit of certainty about what the calendar's bringing. But that's pretty much where I spend my time, and and I train and sauna and look after myself. That's my happy space. I do that every day. I'll go and hit the gym and the sauna straight after this.
Oh, that's awesome. Knowing what you know now, you've gone through all of your studies and you've got this new field that you've moved into. What's one bit of advice you'd give to, like, potentially yourself or a younger operator knowing what you know now?
Yeah, there's so much. For operators specifically, have a plan B. The it could all be over tomorrow. The place we play in, us, the space that we play in is dangerous. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. All the words, paradoxical, but it's dangerous, and we kind of forget about it until the next death or career-ending injury or whatever the case may be. So, have a plan B. The second reason for a plan B is it keeps you grounded in your own future. One thing I've learned in psychology is that's critical, capital C, critical to human well-being, is a sense of ourself in the future. We need to have a sense. You don't need to have certainty. But you need to have future aspirations. It can be as simple in the short term as having a holiday booked, so you have something to look forward to. But we also need to have a sense of ourselves in a future of ourselves, and that's really important. It's fundamental to understanding ourselves as humans. So have a plan B for both those reasons, just in case shit comes to trumps, and also to plant yourself firmly in your own future, have some control. The other thing I'd say is you've got plenty of time to, we're kind of a rush to want to get the cap, get the badge, get to the station, get to the team, and learn everything and do every course and go on every trip and be on everything. But I would encourage the generations coming through now, and I would say anyone under the age of 40, probably more like around 30, 35, but certainly at 30, to practice slowing down. I'll bet both of you, Jason, Josh, you both listen to books on 1.5. I'll guarantee it. But correct me if I'm wrong, but it wouldn't be a push for you to agree with me that most people do. Well, it feels to me like the world's running on 1.5. And what a pity. What a fucking pity to let time be so frivolous, with time our most precious resource. And I think at this end of my life, if I could say one thing to Harry, I'd grab him by the shoulders and say, Harry, look at me. And maybe have to slap him because he's probably not, and say, just slow down, or at least find places to slow down. And there's, in the fourth pillar, modern stoicism and the philosophy of high performance, there's hopefully plenty of suggestions, and I hope motivation, or at least innovation, for people to kind of pick over. But I think they would be the two things I would say to a young group of young operators first. And as you can tell, I love to talk, so there's plenty of other things. Buy a shitbox, you won't be around to drive it, and it's not worth the money you shovel into it anyway. Get a house now, get a house as quickly as possible, or an investment property as quickly. It doesn't matter where it is, what state it's in, just get into it. And choose your life's partners well. That includes partner, or whoever that is, you're lovely, but also the people that are close to you. Choose well, because as you go through life, it's not who's got the most friends, it's who's closest to their close friends. And you, like I say to my kids, you'll probably have 3, 4 or 5 close, really super close friends. Be a gardener, nurture those relationships. There you go. I've said too much already.
Great advice.
Mate, great bits of advice. On the fourth pillar, how do we get our hands on it?
Yeah, so it's available in all fine bookstores, as they say. Dymocks, I think Big W and QBD and the like. You can get it online. Audio's selling really well at the moment, particularly overseas. Trying to break into the UK and the US, but it's very difficult, as it is with anyone in business, I'll tell you that. But yeah, just all the usual places online. Pam McMillan's probably the place that I'll promote, because that maximises sales. To me, if anyone cares, you don't make much money out of writing a book. So that if that's of people's minds, as they tell me, that'd probably be the best way. But Yeah, look, mate, I've been stoked with the response. I've been overwhelmed, actually. I didn't think it'd go that well. It's just musings from an old busted veteran, and it's gone really well. So I'm happy it's been well received, and enjoying the social media rubbish I've been carrying on with. But my agenda behind that is that the externals will be out soon. We'll be playing and touring again soon. So if I can raise my profile a little bit, then that'll raise a profile of the band, hopefully. And that I don't care about. I'm happy to skite and show off about that. So.
Well, that's something we didn't touch on, and I know Jace will probably be
Yeah, I'm
quite
keen
interested to
now.
hear about this because he's a fellow muso as well. So, do you want to tell us a little bit?
Soldiers Yeah, Soldiers 5 on the external. So we set up in 1990. We've released 7. We've been going since 1990. 7 studio albums. You can get them on Spotify. They're all on there. We released our latest one last year called Back on the Cans. And yeah, it's about beer drinking. It's kind of punky Aussie rock, if you like, punk rock for a large part. And we still go. It's my favourite team I've ever been involved in. You know, the love and the man hugging and unabashed kind of boasting that goes on inside the team. Jason, you probably get it. It's great. Music's a place, and it's also, there's no talking. It's all ineffable in quality in a way. You know, it's hard to explain, but no, I love it. We'll be touring the Northern Beaches. I think in January and the South Coast as well, on a bit of a mini tour with the Cosmic Psychos. We've got some shows coming up in Melbourne, but I've got a jam this Saturday. It's an event. The families come along and we go to the pub afterwards, and it's one of my favourite days of the year, full stop. So available in all fine online record
Any
music
shows in
providers.
Brisbane planned?
Would love to, mate. We would really like the next album. We'd like to take on the road nationally, but it has to make kind of financial sense to us.
Yeah.
So we get lots of. I've come up and play, and we go, yeah, okay. Well, can you this is how much it's going to cost. We'll play for nothing. You know, we'll come up and play for beer. But yeah, that's the thing. So shows, and we don't pack out thousands of people. We Perth is probably our stomping ground because we're there for most of our careers, mostly ex-regiment guys. So we get a good show there. We can always make some money and cover our costs and our beer. But outside of touring off the back of someone like the Cosmic Psychos or Powderfinger or something like that, it's got to make sense. But hopefully, soon when national tour, we chip away. We do Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth, and and Jason, it's all original music, so the real deal.
I'm going to guess your bass player.
No, play rhythm guitar and sing or scream or yell or whatever you want. You'll hear it.
I'm going to have a listen.
Do yourself a favour. Back on the Cans is a cracker. That's a cracking tune. Yeah.
The externals, check them out. One final one. Is there a preferred way if someone listens to you and something really resonates with them, perhaps they want to get you in to their organisation, how do they get in touch with Harry Moffitt?
Yeah, just through LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook. I don't really follow that. My wife kind of looks after my kids as well, help me with that. But yeah, I think LinkedIn is the best way. And I think my details are on there. And also Stoughton Group's got a website, so people can reach out. But I think it's pretty simple and approachable. And if, as we say in the team, if we can't directly deal with anything for anyone, we'll help people find an appropriate, whether it's from mental health to mental performance and everything in between. Let us know.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Mate, again, thanks for your, firstly, thanks for your service and thanks for your time. It's been very informative, very informative.
Good on you, Jason. I appreciate it, mate. Thank you. And Josh, thanks to you. And congratulations on the podcast as well, guys. It's not, I get it's a labour of love, but it has a huge impact on the audience. I know you know that, and that's there's no better feeling than knowing you're doing good to young operators out there in the world. So well done.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it. And yeah, go and buy the book, The Fourth Pillar. It's good.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please show your support by subscribing, liking, and rating the podcast on your listening and social media platforms. We are always looking to improve what we do. If you have feedback, suggestions for further guests, topics, or would like to be a guest yourself, please contact us via Instagram.
Stop the scene.